Hi everybody, so a few of you wanted me to do a tour of my rig, so here we go. So a little bit about my rig to start with. It's a do-it-yourself 3 degree of freedom motion simulator. So that's a seat mover with rear traction loss. Now I've been building this rig for quite a few years now. It started off as a static rig, and then I went to 2 degree of freedom, and then I converted it to 3 degree of freedom with the traction loss. So I'll start off with the motion at the back of the rig. So we'll start from the back of the rig and work my way to the front of the rig. So first up we have the controller box, which controls all the motion. Now inside this box we have 3 JRK 12V12 motor controllers, and they will control the 3 motors that will run the motion. So inside the box is the 3 controllers, which you can see the LEDs inside there for it. Now they're connected up through to the batteries at the front, which I'll get to in a bit. So we have the 3 JRK controllers and a bunch of relays and heat sinks and fans in there, and they connect through the motors with these wires here, which runs to the pots, which will give you the position of the motors, and these wires here will give the power to the motors. So there's 3 motors in my setup. The 2 outside motors are for the seat mover, and the one in the middle is for the rear traction loss. The rear traction loss works with this lever arm here, which connects to this tie rod on the upper frame, and then that goes through to this tie rod here on the lower frame. Now I have a few different bolt holes so I can adjust the lever length and the amount of movement and speed of the rig. At the moment I have them on both ones at the second to last setting, so I can have a bit more movement if I need, but I find it's quite good now. So the side motors will connect up to the top of my seat with these 2 rose joints here. They're connected through this arm down to the 2 side motors, which connect up to these lever arms, which will give you up and down movement, which will give you your 2 degree of freedom seat mover. Now to power the rig, we just use this kill switch at the back here. So that's the simulator powered. Now at the moment it's running just purely off the batteries. Now over to the side here, I have 3 batteries which are powering the simulator. So they'll run through this wiring, through the fuses and shunts I've got installed here, through to the JRKs, which will then control the motors to the movement based on the output from sim tools. Now to switch over to mains power, I have this 13.6 volt 40 amp power supply, which I'll just switch on now. So I switch that on and switch this battery isolator on. So now the batteries are being charged by the mains. So now we're effectively on mains power, and the batteries will act like a big capacitor for the motors, so I don't have to worry about big surges or anything like that. To switch the motion simulator off again, I just hit the kill switch over here or at the front of my rig, and that's the motion simulator off. The batteries are still charging, so I can leave them charged. So if I want to run them offline, then they'll be fully charged. To switch the batteries off, I just switch the charger off and switch the battery isolator off. So the rear traction loss works by rolling on wheels at the back here and another one over here, and there's also some wheels up in the middle of the rig, which you can just see in those little holes up under the seat, and this is another one which you can just see up the front there, and then there's a bearing right at the front of the rig. So it pivots on the bearing and rolls on the 4 wheels I've got installed, and is powered by the middle motor and its lever arm. I'll now just give you a quick demonstration of that in action. So here we'll see the traction loss in action, so I'll just flip it to one side and then to the other. So that's the rear traction loss in action, and you can see it also moves in little movements if you want as well. Okay, so now I'll just give you a quick demonstration of one of the side motors moving. So this is the left motor moving. So we'll just move that a bit down and a bit up, and then just do some full range movements. So as you can see, she's pretty fast. She's definitely fast enough to keep up with something like a sim experience or similar type of motion simulator. My next project is going to be to build some more powerful motor controllers, which will be faster than the GRKs that I'm running at the moment. So that should give me a lot more speed out of the motors as well. At the moment I have to run them a bit detuned just because the GRKs aren't big enough to run these motors at full bore. So now over the other side of the rig, I have where the power comes into the main motion system. So here we just have a 4-way plug with my power supply, my GS4, and this one here is for grounding. I've just got it grounding through to the main chassis, and then from there I've got the front grounded and under the seat grounded as well. Now for USB, I'm running a 7-port USB hub at the back here, which has individual ports which you can switch on and off if I want to turn any of the devices off. Now moving forward from there, I have my seatbelt tensioning device. So this will be, as I brake, it will allow my harnesses to pull up. And then in front of that we have, on the bottom of my seat, we have one of my butt kickers. That's a butt kicker advance. And then also on the side of my seats, on each side, I have another butt kicker mini LFE. Now beside that, I have my Derek Spear Design Type 3 handbrake. Now this is using my little quick release mechanism I made, which is using a PVC pipe which has a PVC coupler down the bottom and just that little bolt you see there. So to change over to the flight stick, I just undo that bolt and then slide this upper part out of that lower coupler, and then inside there's a USB extension cable which I can just unplug and then swap over to the flight stick when needed. It takes roughly about 20 to 30 seconds to change over, so it's not very long at all. Now also while we're down here, you can see up there, you can see one of the front wheels for the rear traction loss. So when it moves side to side, it will roll on the back wheels and these front wheels as well, and there's a bearing up in the front. Now moving on to the seat itself. The seat is a Sim Experience GS4, which uses pedals to simulate G-forces on your body. I've had this about 2 years. I'll take the covers off so you can see how the pedals work. So to take the cover off, it's just this little tab here, and you can pull the cover up and see the tabs see the pedals underneath. Now these work via servos on the back of the seat here, and they will just move back and forward like that. So there you can see the servos and the lever arms, and they will just push against you as you corner. There's 4 panels in total. There's 2 on the back and there's 2 on the bottom. Now under the seat you'll see the universal, which is what the seat pivots on for the 2 degree of freedom motion. And also you'll see the wiring for my transducers running up to the 2 transducers that we've got in the bottom of the rig here, and the one at the back of the rig seat here, and the one over the other side of the seat as well. Also here you can see one of the wheels for the rear traction loss, and they'll run on these rails here. So on the floor of the cockpit I've mounted this aluminium checkerboard that works as a false floor, so you can walk on it when you get into and out of the rig. It also hides all my wiring, so all my wiring to the back of the rig runs underneath that chassis plate. Now moving off to the side, I have my Oculus Rift CV1 virtual reality headset, which I use for all my racing. It's quite good. I can just leave it resting on my HOTAS throttles when I'm not using it, so it makes quite a neat little stand. So underneath that I have my HOTAS throttles. They are a Warthog throttles by Thrustmaster. Now I have hooked them up to a little gate system so I can get in and out quite easily. So at the front here I have a little hinge which then connects up through these tubes which sit in the rig itself. So while it's attached, it's really sturdy, it won't go anywhere. So to open the gate, you just lift up the throttles and then open them like that. And that will allow you easy access into the rig. So you just jump in there, and then when you're in there, just close the gate, lift it up, and then drop it in the hole. And that's it locked back into position now. So in front of that we have my Club Sport shifter. So it's a CSS SQ with a aura on the side of it. I mostly only use that in H-pattern mode because I've got my Dst Sequential gearbox, which I much prefer for sequential shifting. Now moving up we have my Dst Button Box. This was a prototype for the AccuForce wheel. It's just using the acrylic frame. The production ones will have a aluminium frame, but as this was a prototype unit, it's just got the acrylic frame. This just connects through USB back to my little 7-port hub, which runs most of the gear in the front of the rig, and again that has switches so I can switch devices on and off when need be. So next up I have my AccuForce steering wheel. So I was one of the beta testers for this. So this was the 9th AccuForce made. I really love the AccuForce. It's strong, it's accurate, it's a really great wheel. So attached to that I have my Momo Mod 30 with the standard AccuForce button box connected to that. I'll just quickly show you the rest of my wheels. So here we have the rest of my wheels. Down the bottom left we have my heavily modified Fanatec Formula wheel. That's got a sim screen in it and a Pro Race LED controller, both from sim projects. And it's also got a DSD button controller in it. Behind that we have my 320mm rally wheel. I mostly use that for dirt rally and that sort of thing. On the top right we have my standard Fanatec customized wheel that's been converted using the Leo Bodner board. So that's just a straight install the circuit board and then all the buttons work as normal. And then on the bottom right I have my 280mm open wheeler car rim, so I use that for skip barbers and the likes. And over to the far left I have my flight stick. So down the bottom you can see the hole where the quick release bolt plugs in. So when I want to change it, I'll just pull out that bolt, slide the PVC out of the coupler, and then unplug that USB lead and then swap them over. So next up I have my prototype DSD sequential shifter. So again, this was the first off the production line, so it differs from the production ones in that my one has an exposed circuit board, where the production ones have it built into the front rail of the shifter. And beside that I have my big DSD Type 3 handbrake. So again, this was first off the production line. Now if you want, you can watch my review that I just posted on that. That will give you a lot more details on that handbrake. It's really good and it's really fun for dirt rally and the likes. Now moving around to the front of my rig, you'll see I have the butt kickers up the front for the front of the chassis mode, and beside that I have my DSD Willwood pedals. Now these have been upgraded to the latest revision, so they've got the better clutch spring, better throttle spring, and all the new additions, and also the new controller box. In front of that I have another butt kicker for the pedals, and over in the corner there I have my controller box for my Accuforce. Now for the pedals, I've made this little heel plate so my feet can be at the right height for my pedals. And also I've mounted my pedals on a seat slider from a car seat, so I can use this handle at the back to move my pedals forward and backwards depending on driver height. Now also from the front you have my main wiring looms coming out. There's two main looms, which the bigger one is the transducers and the smaller one is the data for the USB. So now next up front I have my camera for the Oculus Rift. Now I had a little bit of trouble with vibration dampening for that, so what I've done at the top is I've done 3 nylon washers at the top to help the vibrations, and then right down the bottom I have this big rubber buffer here which will take most of the impact from the butt kickers and isolate the camera. Now from the top of the camera mount I have these connecting rods which are connected through rose joints at the top, which run down to the front of my chassis and connect through rose joints down there. Now that will keep the camera mount rigid but not transfer as much vibrations through it. So as you can see, it's really stable, but it stops the vibrations coming up from the bottom where the butt kickers are. So it was the main problem I had with the rigid mount. I would have a lot of vibrations in game and it would cause tracking errors. So this has eliminated the vibrations but still kept the tracking really good. So moving along, I have my amplifiers. Now I'm using 3 Cool Sound LX 2450 amplifiers. They are 2 by 450 watt RMS per channel. So the top one's the chassis front, left and right. The middle one is the chassis rear, left and right. And the bottom one is the pedals and the shifter. And off to the side there I have a butt kicker 300 watt amp for the amplifier under the seat. Now onto my computer. My computer is a Fractal Design case. It's a Define R5 case. So for the cooling, I'm running 2 fans up the front. And then I'll show you the rest of the cooling. So at the top I'm running a Corsair H110i GTX water cooler. That's a 280mm water cooler. So I'll quickly take the case off and show you what's inside. So inside of my case I have a i7 6700K processor that's running on an ASUS Maximus 8 Hero motherboard. I've got 16 gigs of DDR4 memory. I've got the one fan at the back exhausting, the two fans at the top for the water cooler exhausting, another fan at the bottom as an intake, and two front fans as intakes as well. So that means the air comes from the front and bottom, travels across the motherboard, and then exhausts up through the top. In the PCIe slots I've got in the top, I've got my ASUS wireless card. Below that I've got my Gigabyte GTX 980 G1 Gaming. Below that I have a Sound Blaster Audigy 5.1, which is used for SimVibe. Below that I have a USB 3 PCIe card, which I use for my Oculus Rift and my Acuforce. Then below that I have my Sound Blaster Z, which is used for my game audio, although now I use my Oculus Rift headphones, so I don't actually use that sound card. I always try to go for a nice simple clean look when I build my computers, so there's no frills, no fancy LEDs. It runs really quiet with the water cooler. With this many fans, they'll run really slow, so I've got no problems with temperature. I can run it as hard as I want and it stays really cool. For storage, I have 4 1TB drives in RAID arrays, and around the back I have a 512 gig SSD, which is a Samsung Evo 850. And the power supply is a Cooler Master V750. For backup I use a Seagate external 3TB drive, which I use Acronis to back up my gaming rig with. Moving up to the top I have a spare 27-inch screen, which I just use for starting games and configuring software. And beside that I have my wireless antenna. Now moving along from there, I have my old gaming machine, which has got my Oculus Rift DK2 on it, and my 65-inch plasma with my DK2 camera on top of it, and my Panasonic surround sound. Now also moving out to my garage, I have my collection of classic cars. So the one in the front there is my 1975 Hillman Avenger, which is built from the ground up. I took about 2 years to restore it. So it's designed to be rally car inspired, so it's got the big bolt-on flares, it's got a rally prepped engine, it's got a custom fiberglass bonnet and boot. And then behind that we have my 1972 Chrysler Valiant Charger, which I've had for about 12 years now. That's my big muscle car. I will attach some photos of them. So to finish off my setup, I have my little sound recording laptop. So I've just got that running through my headset, running through a Art tube amp, and then running into a Scarlett sound interface, and then running into my incredibly old laptop. And also over the other side of the room, I have my work computer. So I also have this hooked up to my other gaming rig, so I can play FPS and RTS games while sitting at my desk, which is quite good. So I can play console type games on my Xbox controllers, on my 65-inch TV, simulator and Rift games on my motion rig, and then first-person shooters on my other computer. So these are 27-inch 1440p HP monitors, and they connect through that little HDMI and USB extension all the way back to my main rig, which is over here. Also, I'm quite a fan of collectibles, so you've got one of my many shelves of collectibles here. You can see over there in the right hand corner, you can see a couple of Doom dioramas. Above that you can see a Groot and a Portal gun and a Half-Life 2 gun. Beside that is a Portal turret. In front of that is a Boba Fett. And then at the front there is a 2x4 which was signed by Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And over in the corner there is a Bioshock Infinite hook gun. So that pretty much sums up my tour of my rig. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you got any other questions, feel free to ask, and I'll make a follow-up video.